You don't just dislike attention, you physically recoil from it. Your body tenses when someone puts a spotlight on you. When all eyes turn your direction, when you're forced to perform for an audience that feels like a jury, and everyone tells you this is a problem, that you need to get over it, that confidence is a skill you can learn, but they don't understand that for you, attention doesn't feel like validation. It feels like exposure, like standing naked in front of strangers who are cataloging every flaw, every mistake, every reason you don't deserve to take up space. You've spent your whole life trying to be invisible, not because you're shy or insecure in the way people think, but because something deep in your wiring tells you that being seen is dangerous, that the safest place to exist is in the margins, in the background, where nobody can judge you, criticize you, expect things from you that you're terrified you can't deliver. When someone compliments you in public, your first instinct is not gratitude, it's suspicion, wondering what they want, what they're really saying. If this is some kind of setup where the punchline is your humiliation, and you deflect immediately, minimize the compliment, redirect attention to literally anyone else because holding it feels like holding a bomb that's about to explode in your face. You avoid social media not because you don't understand it, but because the thought of broadcasting your life, of curating a public persona, of performing happiness and success for an audience of people who are mostly strangers, makes you feel sick, and everyone acts like you're missing out, like you're choosing loneliness, when really you're choosing authenticity over performance, choosing peace over the exhausting game of maintaining an image that was never really you. In groups, you fade into the background automatically, not because you have nothing to say, but because speaking up means all eyes on you, all ears waiting for you to say something worthy of the interruption. And the pressure of that expectation is so heavy, you'd rather stay silent than risk disappointing people with your ordinariness. You've been called quiet, shy, antisocial, awkward, standoffish, cold, and each label is another way of saying there's something wrong with you for not wanting what everyone else seems to want, for not craving attention, validation, recognition, for being content to exist without an audience. The panic is real, that feeling when someone puts you on the spot, asks you to speak in a meeting, calls on you in class, toasts you at dinner, and suddenly your mind goes blank, your words disappear, your heart races like you're in actual danger. And you're not, you know you're not. But your body doesn't know the difference between social exposure and physical threat. It just knows that being seen feels like being hunted. You prepare obsessively for any situation where you might have to perform, rehearsing conversations, planning answers to questions nobody's asked, yet trying to control every variable so nothing catches you off guard. But despite all that preparation, when the moment comes, you still freeze, still fumble, still walk away, replaying every awkward pause and wishing you could just disappear entirely. People tell you to be more confident, to put yourself out there, to stop caring what others think, and you want to scream that it's not about caring what they think. It's about the fundamental discomfort of being perceived at all, of having your inner world exposed to outer judgment, of existing in a way that makes you accountable to people whose opinions shouldn't matter but somehow do. Here's what actually happened, why you are the way you are. At some point, probably early, being seen became dangerous. Whether it was a parent who only noticed you to criticize, a classroom where speaking up meant ridicule, a moment when you were vulnerable, and someone punished you for it, and your nervous system learned that visibility equals vulnerability equals pain, so it started protecting you the only way it knew how, by making you want to hide. You weren't born hating attention. You learned to hate it because attention came with consequences, with expectations you couldn't meet, with scrutiny that found every flaw and magnified it, with pressure to be someone you weren't sure how to be, and eventually hiding became easier than performing. Silence became safer than speaking. Invisibility became your armor against a world that felt too harsh, too judgmental, too ready to punish you for being human. The withdrawal wasn't weakness, it was survival. It was your psyche protecting you from repeated exposure to situations that made you feel inadequate. And now, years later, you're still operating on that program, still avoiding the spotlight, not because you're choosing to, but because your body believes at a cellular level that being seen is being endangered. You developed a whole identity around not needing attention, convinced yourself that wanting to be recognized is shallow, that caring about visibility is vain, that your preference for the background is a choice that makes you better than the people performing for validation. But underneath that superiority is just fear dressed up as virtue, a way of making your avoidance feel intentional instead of compulsive. The truth nobody wants to say is that you're not protecting yourself anymore. You're imprisoning yourself, keeping your gifts hidden, your voice silent, your presence minimized, not because the world doesn't need what you have, but because showing it requires a level of vulnerability you've trained yourself to never allow. You hate being the center of attention because you learned that being centered makes you a target, but that learning is outdated. It's based on experiences that don't have to define your present, on people who don't have to control your future, on a version of safety that's actually keeping you small. So here's what you need to understand. You don't have to love attention. You don't have to become someone who performs for validation. You don't have to transform into an extrovert who feeds on recognition. But you do need to stop treating visibility like a threat. You need to practice being seen in small doses, in safe environments, with people who've earned your trust, proving to your nervous system that exposure doesn't always lead to pain. Start by speaking up once in conversations where you'd normally stay silent, not with anything profound, just with a simple contribution that lets you practice being heard without catastrophe. And notice that most of the time nothing bad happens. People don't attack you, the world doesn't end, you just existed out loud for a moment and survived. Let yourself receive compliments without deflecting. Just say thank you. And sit with the discomfort of being acknowledged, of someone seeing something good in you and saying it out loud, and resist the urge to minimize yourself back into invisibility. Share something small online if you avoid social media, not to become an influencer but to practice existing in public without the performance, to prove you can be visible and still be authentic, you still maintain your privacy and depth while occasionally letting people see the surface. The goal is not to become someone who craves the spotlight. It's to become someone who can tolerate it when it naturally falls on you. Someone who doesn't panic when they're seen. Someone who understands that being noticed doesn't mean being judged, that visibility can coexist with authenticity, that you can be seen and still be safe. You hate being the center of attention because someone taught you that the center is where you get hurt. But you're not that powerless anymore. You're not that exposed. You're not in the situations that made invisibility necessary. And continuing to hide is not protecting you. It's just making sure nobody ever sees how remarkable you actually are when you stop performing smallness. The world doesn't need another person fighting for attention. But it does need people like you who have depth, who think before they speak, who exist with intention instead of performance. And those qualities only matter if you occasionally let them be seen. If you stop treating your presence like an apology and start treating it like the gift it actually is to anyone paying real attention.